Magua, Panyu Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. Blessing of the Sabbath. Barakatha Yahweh Basham Yahweh Shai Asherab Nathan the Nawa Hashabath Bashalawam the Wada Aman. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the Sabbath and peace. Thank you, so be it. The Ali Ma'ash Shirai Machad, Psalms 121. Anya Harayim Nayim Ye O Harim Mayan Yebawa Isaiah Yebawa Mayahu Shai Shab Shemayim Warataza La Yenathan Lamawat Regalia Yela Yenawam Shashramarka Hanela Walla Yeshan Shashumar Yeshrelib Yehawah Shemaria Yehawah Tazalib Ayub Yim Yewamam Hashemash La Hakaya Wayarak La Balayela Yehawah Yashemaria Makau Ra Yashamar Napasha Yehuwa Yashamar Habalakya Wabawa Ayab My Fa wa Aid I Willam Basham Yehoshai for what Aman. Psalms 121, a song of degrees. I will lift up mine eyes into the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth, and even forevermore. Amen. Shemaiah Sharala, Hero Israel. Shemaiah Sharala, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Akkad. Shemaiah Sharala, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Akkad. Shemaiah Sharala, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Akkad. Deuteronomy 6 and 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. Amen. Okay. Thapalai the Lord's Prayer. Abiyanawa Shabbat Shemayim Kodash Hayya Shamka Yahweh Malakwafka Thaba'a Ratazawanka Hayya Aisha Barataza Kabashimayim, Napimanawa, Lakham, Yawam, Zad, Wasalaklanawa, Kabawatnawa, Kasalaknawa, Kabawat Yanawa, Walla Abiyarnawa, Oh, Nasayawan, Naba, Hawashinawa, Murai, Kaya, Lakab, Amalakwa, Wa Allah, Wa Thaparath, Wa Iwalam, Aman. Matthew 6 and 9. After this manner, therefore, pray ye, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Ha'ai the Ten Commandments. La'at, Yahayat, Lakat, Alahayim, Akariim, Alapinyat, La'at, Ta'ishat, Lakat, Paso, Wala'at, Thibadam, La'at, Talakwakath, Shamwat, Yahawat, Alahayaka, Lashawat, Zakat, Ath, Hayawam, Hashabath, Laquadashwad, Kabad, Abiyaka, Wa Amaka, La'at, Taratazak, La'at, Tana'at, La'at, Taganab, La'at, Tha'inat, Shakur, La'at, Thachamad, Kal, Asherah, Lara'ika, Aman. Exodus 20 and 3. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. Amen. Yeshabwa, please be seated. Barakatha Yahweh, Bashimi Hawashai, Asherah, Nathanana, Paria Kapin, Thwadama. La Yahweh, Bashimi Hawashai, of Yasher Allah. English translation: Blessed are you, Yahweh, the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel. Amadwa, Panyuwa, Yerushalayim. Stand and face Jerusalem. Barakatha Yahweh, Haggadah, Rakawam, Abiyah, Wanama'ah, Aliyawan, Malak, Shal, Shemayim, Warataza, Wakal, Dabarim, Kayayam, Wagam, Hamashiach, Mayahawa, Arawanawa, Ahabnawa, Hapalab, Yawa Yahawashai, Zakarnawa, Yahawa, Baratazawan, Ainka, Yasha'ala, Zarnawa, Bana, Wasap, Yasha'ala, Au, Nanawa, Yum Yan, Aitha, Kayawamyam, Makwadam, Babakusha, Shalak, Mike Allah, Watazawadak, Alahayam, La Maganawa, Raparnawa, Washamad, Ionawa, Bakur, Shalak, Haroka, Shau, Yahweh Shai, Lanawa, Lalamanawa, Rabiam, Kakama, Thabawana, Wada Aith, Shau, Da Barka, Basham, Yahweh Shai, Thawada, Thum Yad, Why Walam, Aman. English translation: Blessed are you, Yahweh, the great, merciful, mighty, terrible, most high power, King of heaven and earth and all things living, and also the anointed from Yahweh, our Lord, our friend, the wonderful counselor, Yahweh Shai. Remember, Yahweh, favorably your people Israel. Help us build and gather Israel, most high, we beg you, right now, like the days of old. Please send Michael and the righteous powers to protect us, heal us, and watch over us. Mainly send the spirit of Yahweh Shai to us to teach us much wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of thy word. In the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you, always and forever, so be it. Repeat the Hebrew only. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the law. Barakatha Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherat, Natan Lanawa, Hatawara. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us light to see. Barakatha Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherat, Natan Lanawa, Awar, Lara Awak. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the ram's horn to call the people. Barakatha Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherat, Natan Lanawa, Karan, Hayob, La Korah, Ha'aim. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the olive oil to anoint Israel. Barakatha Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherat, Natan Lanawa, Hasheman, Zayef, Lamashak, Yasha'Allah, Yeshabwa, if you see it. Okay. So Shalom Yasharala. So Shalom everybody that's here in Philly with us. Shalom everybody watching on live stream, and Shalom everyone listening on teleconference. Welcome to Hayashara Kanas, or the Congregation of Israel, where we teach that the descendants of slaves, as well as the indigenous peoples found mainly throughout North, Central, South America, and the Caribbean, make up the southern and northern kingdoms of the 12 tribes of Israel, and that we fall into a lower state politically, economically, even religiously, because we broke the laws of God found in the Bible given to us by Moses, and that we come out of this lower state that we fall into by turning back to these commandments that we broke by following Jesus Christ. One way we do that is by keeping the Sabbath holy from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. And as our particular branch of Christ does, we go through a Sabbath service as the Most High and Christ would allow it. This week we're going through the Old Testament again, and we're going back to 2 Samuel's. Now we're in chapters 7 and 8. Once again, 2 Samuel 7 and 8 is going to be our reading for today. My name is Nabia Zerbabal. I have the privilege and pleasure of going through the service today with you guys as the Most High in Christ by way of the Holy Spirit. So just write down for your notes that today, according to the Gregorian calendar, would be the 4th of February, 2023. But then according to our calendar, it's the 11th month and the 15th day. And we know that because this new moon happened to come in on a Sabbath as well, which was 2 weeks ago. So we know we're in the 15th day. So it makes it easier to remember the count if you lost count during the week. Okay. So now 2 Samuel's chapter 7, which, if we remember the last details of what we read in the last time we were in Samuel, about David finally bringing the ark back to Jerusalem, which they're initially setting up as the capital, since we won it from the Canaanites that had dominion over the people of Jebus, right? The Jebusites. So we took it from them and then made it the capital. Jebus being in the region of where Benjamin resides, as far as his inheritance. You look on the map and look at the borders. But now let's go to 2 Samuel 7. And let's read 2 Samuel 7 and 1. And just note that we might make certain references here and there to Chronicles, but overall, we're about to read now. If you read this chapter, you're going to see similar events recounted in the First Chronicles, the 17th chapter. You're going to see are going to parallel 2 Samuel 7th chapter. Just like for 2 Samuel's the 8th chapter, when we get into that, that's going to have similar events which you'll find in First Chronicles, the 18th chapter. You should read those side by side. We can compare and contrast them. But when we get to Chronicles eventually during the Sabbath, we can look back to this as a reference as well. But we'll go into that in more detail when we get there. So now 2 Samuel chapter 7 and verse 1, which reads, "And it came to pass, when the king sat in his house, and the Lord, or Yahweh, had given him rest about from all his enemies." You see that? So the Most High, being a man of his word, he told any of us that took the leadership over Israel that if we followed him and followed his example, that he would give us rest from our enemies. We're going to talk about the king's house too as well, as far as when this came about or how this came about. But as far as the Most High giving us rest from our enemies, just to a legal reference we can go to as a reference is Deuteronomy chapter 12 in verse 10. Deuteronomy 12 and 10, which reads, "But when you go over Jordan and dwell in a land which the Lord or Yahweh and your God giveth you to inherit," it says, "and when he giveth you rest from all your enemies round about, so that ye dwell in safely." So he was talking here to the children of Israel, specifically to I believe this was the Reuben, Gad, and Had tribe of Manasseh, since they were the ones on the other side of Jordan. When you look at where the tribe was situated, but eventually this would be for the whole land of Canaan. The Most High made this promise, and then we even see him fulfilling this during the time of Joshua, because Joshua was the commander over Israel after Moses gave up the ghost, and he was righteous, as we see in the story of Joshua in that history. But we'll see what he says about that after they went in to establish the land with Joshua's leadership. So now this is Joshua 21. Joshua 21 in verse 44. I'll start from 43 and read down to 45 to get the whole section. But 44 is the main verse that I want. So Joshua 21 and 43 reads, "And the Lord or Yahweh gave unto Israel all the land which he spake, rather he sware to give unto their fathers," or ancestors in the Hebrew. "And they possessed it and dwelt therein." 44, it says, "And Yahweh gave them rest round about, according to all that he sware unto their fathers, and there stood not a man of all their enemies before them. Yahweh delivered all their enemies into their hand." Then it says in 45, to close it out, "There failed not aught of any good thing which the Yahweh had spoken unto the house of Israel, all came to pass." You see that? So the Most High is one to deliver on his end of the bargain as long as we deliver ours. But usually we're the ones that fall short. So that was, sure I don't mess this up. Okay. Oops. So that was Joshua 21, 43 to 45, emphasis on verse 44. All right, got it. So now back to 2 Samuel 7 and 2. It says that the king, of course, this is referring to David now, because we read above in the previous chapters that he perceived now that he is the king instead of Saul, his neighbor. It says that the king said unto Nathan the prophet. So now something you'll see, not just for David, but for other kings or other leaders, is sometimes they'll have a prophet with them. It's not to say the Most High won't speak to David, but sometimes the Most High might communicate to someone very important, but then have a prophet to be the spokesperson for the Most High to relay certain messages. It's not to say that David himself wasn't inspired by God, but he also had prophets as well that would tell him certain things from the Most High. He says, "See now I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of God dwelled within curtains." Right? So David, having his mind on Yahweh, thinking, how can I do right by him? How can I please him? How can I give him the glory, all good qualities to have when it comes to our relationship with the Most High? He says, look at me. I dwell in a house of cedar, but it says, but the ark of God dwelleth within curtains. Right? So how am I as king having this nice house that was built me, but now the Most High himself doesn't have a house? So he has this thought, as we're going to read on, and we're going to see how the Most High responds as far as this idea that he has, right? To build the Most High a permanent fixture, a house. But as far as David's house goes, you can just write down to link with 7 and 2. We just read this last time, 2 Samuel chapter 5. 2 Samuel chapter 5, and verse 11. Once again, 2 Samuel chapter 5 and verse 11. This all being a part of David's rise to power, him taking over Jerusalem and establishing other areas from the Philistines and other Canaanites that are there. And as we're going to read in today's chapters, beyond the Canaanites, other nations that are on our borders that David would fight against to expand his territory. So 2 Samuel chapter 5 and verse 11, it reads, "And Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David and cedar trees and carpenters and masons," these being operative, not speculative, wink, wink, "and they built David an house." This is the house that we're talking about. This is the house of cedar David's talking about here in chapter 7. And then it says in verse 12 again, like I mentioned earlier, "And David perceived that the Lord, or Yahweh, had established him king over Israel, and that he had exalted his kingdom for his people Israel's sake." So once again, you see this attitude of, it's not about who I am, but it's about what I can give, what I can give back, and how I can help the Most High build up his people. Me just being the one the Most High chose to be in this leadership position, to be a ruler over them. And then as far as Nathan, we see Nathan being mentioned too as one of the righteous prophets when we look at things written aforetime. But now you can just write down Ecclesiasticus in the Apocrypha. This is chapter 47. I'll just read verse 1. Ecclesiasticus chapter 47 and verse 1. It says, "And after him rose up Nathan to prophesy in the time of David." Right? And after him, when you read above, I think in the previous chapter, it's just going into Samuel and how important he was. To Saul, the king that came before David, and to David as far as anointing him. But now Nathan will be the one to attend to David, as we're going to read in these chapters of Samuel going forward. Similar to how Samuel attended to Saul and prophesied for him. So Ecclesiasticus 47 and 1. Back to 2 Samuel 7. This is now verse 3. Some updates there. So now 2 Samuel 7 and 3, it says, "And Nathan said to the king, Go, do all that is in thine heart, for Yahweh is with thee." Right? So a heavy statement, right? To be given to David, given to any of us, right? This may seem contradictory to what we're usually used to reading. Things that Jeremiah said, say, for example, in 17 and 9, where it says, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it?" But now that's just going to a heart left to its own devices. But the reason why we see Nathan saying this to David is because the Most High, remember, he knows all the hearts and minds of men and women, right? David notwithstanding. And given David's thought process and what he's trying to do, specifically what he's trying to do here when it comes to his idea to build the Most High house, Nathan's just telling him that what? The Most High approves of this thought, of this idea, right? Not only what he wants to do, but why he wants to do it. As we always talk about when it comes to matters, we always want to make sure we understand both when it comes to be it small matters or great matters when it comes to what we say and do as individuals or as groups, our nation or other nations, right? So the Most High has that level of trust when it comes to David as far as what he's trying to do and why. It's not something he's trying to do for himself or try to give himself a name, but it's something to where he wants to glorify the Most High's name. Once again, these are all just things we can look to and be inspired by when it comes to whatever we do in this life for the Most High in Christ. It doesn't matter what scale it's on. It's all about what we want to do, given what we've been given from the Most High as far as his gifts. So this is Jeremiah 17:9, where it says, the heart is deceitful above all things, desperately wicked. Who can know it? So once again, this isn't a contradiction, but no, it's just letting us know that the Most High has that trust when it comes to David, knowing his heart, knowing his mind, what he's about. And then we see it in more than one place too. Here in Acts, I'll get this real quick. So let's go to Acts. We'll see the apostles make mention of David as well when it comes to his heart or his mind. We know in the scriptures the heart and the mind are the same. Why is this thing not working? Okay, there we go. All right, so this is Acts chapter 13. Acts chapter 13 and verse 22. Once again, Acts 13 and 22, which reads, and when he had removed him, the him when you read above was King Saul, he raised up unto them David to be their king, which we're reading now in Samuel's. It says, to whom he also gave testimony and said, I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after mine own heart, which shall fulfill all my will. You see, so that's the trust that he has when it comes to David. But he says, a man after mine own heart. So it shouldn't be a shock when we see this wording of whatever's in thine heart to do, go forth and do it, right? And we know namely is talking about in this specific scenario, even though it's still something to take note of, this statement being made, it's concerning him wanting to build a house for the Most High, whereas he has a house, but the Most High doesn't. And then verse 23, which is kind of a spoiler somewhat, but we'll see it actually happen when we go back to 2 Samuel 7. It says in verse 23, of this man's seed, referring to David, had God, according to his promise, raised into Israel a Savior, Jesus, right? Or Yahushua, right? Which we go back to 7, we're going to get that prophecy concerning this. Let's go back. Because it's going to touch on a psalm we're going to read too, to link what we're reading here as well. 2 Samuel chapter 7. That was Acts 13:22 to 23. So somewhat linked with Jeremiah 17:9, which went with 7 and 3 for 2 Samuel 7. So 2 Samuel 7 and 4, it reads, "And it came to pass that night that the word of Yahweh came unto Nathan, saying." So the word of Yahweh is going unto Nathan as it goes to all prophets when he wants them to know something and to take it down. It says in verse 5, "Go and tell my servant David, thus saith Yahweh." So kings on high, be them of Israel or even the other nations, they're still considered servants to the Most High, right? Because the Most High, he rules over all. It says in verse 5, "Go and tell my servant David, thus saith Yahweh, shalt thou build me an house for me to dwell in?" Verse 6, "Whereas I have not dwelt in any house since the time that I have brought up the children of Israel out of Egypt, even to this day, but have walked in a tent and in a tabernacle," right? Which we read about that going back to the time of Moses, about him dwelling between the cherubims, right, above the Ark of the Covenant, right, and how he'll set his tabernacle amongst us. It says in verse 7, "In all the places wherein I have walked with all the children of Israel, spake I a word with any of the tribes of Israel, whom I commanded to feed my people Israel, saying, Why build ye not me an house of cedar?" So he's saying, yeah, I never asked this of anyone else, right? It says, "Now therefore, so shalt thou say unto my servant David, thus saith the Lord of hosts." So now he's telling Nathan, okay, this is what I want you to tell him based on this thought or this idea that he has. "I took thee from the sheepcote, from following the sheep, to be ruler over my people, over Israel." Nice verse because it shows you who God's people are. And then more specifically, it says, "I took thee from the sheepcote, from following the sheep." So David being a shepherd looking after his father Jesse's flock, that kind of prepared him in a sense to become eventually ruler over the Most High's flock, which is us, his people, right? So the care and attention he gave to sheep is like a parallel or allegory to what he would do when it comes to the whole nation. And we know this history. You can link with chapter 7 and verse 8. This is 1 Samuel chapter 16. Let's go back in time a little bit. This first happened, back when David was first anointed. 1 Samuel chapter 16. I'll read verse 11 and verse 12. So now this is 1 Samuel chapter 16 in verse 1. It reads, chapter 16 and verse 11. "And Samuel said unto Jesse, Are here all thy children? And he said, There remaineth yet the youngest, and behold, he keepeth the sheep. And Samuel said unto Jesse, Send and fetch him, for we will not sit down till he come hither." So Samuel was sent on a mission to find the next to be anointed as king over Israel, and he sent him to the inheritance of Jesse of the tribe of Judah. So above, he looked at all his other sons. Then the Most High told Samuel, "Nope, you haven't found him yet." So they went to go get the youngest one, which was David out of his brothers. It says in verse 12, "He sent and brought him in, that he was ruddy and withal of a beautiful countenance and goodly to look to." And the Lord said, or Yahweh said, arise, anoint him, for this is he. Right? So when we see ruddy, it can mean red, but it also just mean of a youthful appearance. Right? Because you'll have certain back and forth sometimes people will do to gainsay, call themselves doing scholarly research, but really it's just to cut us off from being a nation or to deny us from being a nation, to say, oh, look, it says he was ruddy or red, but you say Esau was red. So don't get tripped up by that. It can mean more than one thing. Not to mention, even we come in different shades, from a light complexion to a dark complexion anyway. But the key is we know his lineage, and he comes from the 12 tribes of Israel. That's what matters most. We really try to use that to try to discredit what we teach in the scriptures about God's chosen people, and within God's chosen people who we set apart. You'll see the gainsayers will always have something to say about those who the Most High sets apart during any time in history, whether it's Christ himself or David, his ancestor, or the different prophets of different times, right? But now let's also get Psalm 78 to go with this. Psalms 78. It's a little too far. Seven, 78. Here we go. I'm going to read the last couple of verses here. So that was 1 Samuel 16, 11, and 22. 11 and 12. I keep saying the numbers like that. And Psalm 78. I'll start from 70, read to the end, which is 72. It reads, Psalm 78 and 70, he, of course, the Most High, you read above, chose David also his servant, just like he told Nathan, and took him from the sheepfolds, right? Verse 71, from following the ewes, great with young, and ewe just being a female sheep. He brought him to feed Jacob his people, and Israel his inheritance. So now we got God's people, then we also have God's inheritance. Other scriptures we can use to back up who the Most High is dealing with. 72, so he fed them according to the integrity of his heart and guided them by the skillfulness of his hands. See that? So you see here the integrity of his heart. There we see a mention again of the Most High, how he made David, and how David's mind, his heart, is after his, that he has integrity as the Most High has integrity. So you see that mention of here again as well. And remember, as we're going to see, David's flesh and blood just like anybody else, right? But remember, when it comes to us, and as we try to follow Christ's example, whether it's back then and now, it's not so much always about getting it right, but it's about what we do when we get things wrong, when it comes to word or deed, right? That's what's key, because the scriptures talk about in the Old and New Testament that there's not one righteous that do good and sinneth not, right? Now we all sin and fall short of the glory of God, but it's about how we get up when we do fall down. So let's just remember that as you read throughout the scriptures, but especially as you read through David and his history over these next Sabbaths, going through the rest of Samuel's and even going into the Kings. All right, so let's go back to 2 Samuel chapter 7. Now we're in verse 9. It says, and I was with thee whithersoever thou wentest. The Most High was with David whithersoever he wentest. Remember, this is what he's telling Nathan to tell David. And have cut off all thine enemies out of thy sight, and have made thee a great name, like unto the name of the great men that are in the earth. And we'll see more of this in chapter 8, as far as the Most High setting him up above the other nations that surround him. But as far as him having a great name, remember the scriptures talk about this when it comes to having a great name or a great report or a good report. You can write down Proverbs chapter 15. In verse 30, once again, Proverbs chapter 15 in verse 30, where it reads, "The light of the eyes rejoiceth the heart, and a good report maketh the bones fat." See that? So you want to have that good report so that you can be healthy, right? Without and within, physically and spiritually. To go with 15 and 30, we can get the one. This is a little more popular, but this is a good one. Proverbs 22 in verse 1, where it reads, "A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver and gold." So nothing can beat the Lord's favor. That's what this is saying here. Be you rich or poor, famous or obscure, it's about the Most High being with you in what you do, and Him not being with you and how bad that is. Especially if you know what it is for the Lord to be with you and then He departs from you, and just how terrifying that can be. Also, Ecclesiastes chapter 7. Ecclesiastes chapter 7 in verse 1, where the sentiments is echoed here. It says, "A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth." Right? So the first precept is what we want, but the second precept is good too. Talking about it's better how a thing ends as opposed to how a thing begins. Right? And as you read down, it goes into, why a person's death is better than one's birth. Because what it's going into is talking about how it's better to go into the house of mourning to the house of feasting, because in the end, it'll make your spirit better. It'll make you consider more. It'll make you be more thoughtful of the days that you have left, or however many days the Most High has allowed you to have, as opposed to just being, feasting, which is good, but mourning is better. So it's not saying it's bad to feast. It's just saying it's better to mourn because you'll be more considerate of the times that you have left and how precious they are. But the emphasis being here on the first precept, that good name or that reputation. It's funny because we're talking about Samuel. In the Hebrew, his name Shamwa Allah means the name of the Lord, right? And name in the Hebrew, Sham, like when we say the salute, Bahasham, in the name, Sham could also mean fame as well. So when you see someone say, when you see in the scriptures it says got him fame or got him a name, it's the same Hebrew word. Just a little fun thing when you go into certain names or certain words. But now back to 2 Samuel. Oh, sorry, I got one more here. Almost forgot. Here's one in the Apocrypha, Ecclesiasticus. I won't pull this one too much, but add this to the list. Ecclesiasticus chapter 41 and 13. Once again, Ecclesiasticus 41 and 13, which reads, "A good life hath but few days, but a good name endureth forever." So we see how that echoes we read in Ecclesiastes 7:1 about the day of death as opposed to the day of one's birth. So a good life have but a few days, because it's like they always say, time flies when you're having fun, right? and it flies even faster when you do righteously. So those days seem like they just went by, whereas a life full of pain and suffering, it seems like every day, you know, you're waiting for it to be over, but it won't end. Like we see in the curse, right? In the curse, what does it say? Because we don't follow the Most High, instead of our days being enjoyable, there'll be days full of pain and suffering and anguish. And then because of that, it's like we would seek for the day to be over, but it would just carry on. It would persist. It's like back in school days. If you ever had days in school you just didn't want to be there, you come in, you're in first period or first block, however they do your schedule. You see, it's like, okay, it's 8:30. Oh boy, got a whole day. And then you're in class for like an hour doing stuff. You look at the clock, and it's like an hour went by, but it's only 8:45. I could have sworn an hour went by, right? Because you're so hell bent on getting the heck up out of there. But that's because you're not enjoying yourself. Whereas, if you're enjoying first period, you like the subject matter, you're reading this and doing your ditto, your worksheet, or whatever. You blink your eyes, you go, oh man, I can't believe first period is over already. It feels like I just got in here. So that's in the scriptures. That's not just something we just came up with now. No, it's always been the case. And I didn't have it in the notes, but I'll just give it to you guys as we're talking about it. I just thought about it now. But in Deuteronomy 28, as far as the days being long due to the curse, when we don't keep the commandments, it's still 24 hours in a day, but it's not going to feel like it. It's like Christ tells, right? Christ says, are there not 12 hours in a day? As far as, 12 hours a day, 12 hours a night. But it can feel longer or shorter. So Deuteronomy 28, in verse 67, second to last verse, Deuteronomy 28, okay, there we go. Deuteronomy 28 and 67, it reads, in the morning thou shalt say, what God were even? And at even thou shalt say, what God were morning? For the fear of thine heart, wherewith thou shalt fear, for the sight of thine eyes, which thou shalt see. So you just be in a constant state of suffering, terror even, to where you yearn for the days that go by. You can't enjoy the moment because of this curse, everything that comes with it. So now back to 2 Samuel. Yeah, just made me think of that. We were reading about those other precepts in those last couple verses. Especially that verse 41 and 41 and 13 of Ecclesiasticus, about how quickly a good life goes by. So 2 Samuel 7, now I'm in verse 10. It reads, moreover, I will appoint a place for my people Israel again, and will plant them that they may dwell in a place of their own and move no more. Neither shall the children of wickedness afflict them anymore as before time. So lead them to a time where we wouldn't be fighting with nations anymore, the Canaanites especially, and the nations that surround that land of Israel. And we see again here, cause thee to rest from all thine enemies. We were reading that earlier when we linked up scriptures for verse 1 of this chapter, right? And we were moving around a lot during the times when we were in the wilderness. But then, after we came out of the wilderness, Joshua led us to fight the different battles in Israel at the time Canaan to establish it and make it our own so they would have a permanent place. So now we're set up in Israel. So now just to solidify that, David has it in his heart, in his mind, to build this temple for the Most High. And the Most High is acknowledging that as he's telling Nathan. It says in verse 11, and as since the time that I commanded judges to be over my people Israel, right, going back to the time of judges now, which was in between the time of King Saul, King David, and the time of Joshua, and have caused thee to rest from all thine enemies. Also, Yahweh telleth thee that he will make thee an house. Then it says in verse 12, and when thy days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, I will set up thy seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. So now, this is that promise that we see that was made to his son that will come after him, right? He would have many sons, but speaking to a specific son, right, who would take on this inheritance for his kingdom to be established through his particular line. Similar to how the Most High dealt with Moses' brother Aaron to say, Aaron, I'm dealing with you and your loins and those that come after you. You're going to give rise to the line of priests. So you have the Aaronic covenant, as the scholars call it, just as you see in the title here, the Davidic covenant, as far as the line of kings being established through David. So we have 12 tribes, right? We know we're a holy priesthood, right? A royal nation, a royal priesthood. But now within the nation of Israel, we have those two particular bloodlines that are set apart, that are reckoned, right? The house of Aaron for the priests, and now the house of David for the kings. And it's not strange that when we get to the time of the New Testament, the New Covenant, I should say the New Testament, as far as the books, but when we get to the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and that history, we see that the two key figures that get things going are John the Baptist as well as Jesus the Christ, right? And how interesting that each of them will come out of those two lines. John the Baptist come out of that Aaronic covenant line of priests. Then you would have Christ come out of that Davidic covenant, that Davidic line of kings. And for both parents, John the Baptist, both his parents coming from Aaron, and then Christ, or Yahweh Shai, both his parents coming from David. So we know when it comes to being an Israelite, it's within and it's without. It's spiritual, but it's physical too. So don't let any of our people or other nations tell you it's one or the other. It's both. Both have their significance, right? But now, to link with 7 and 12, because we see this being mentioned again during the time of Solomon, just write down First Kings, and we'll get this when we get to Kings eventually. First Kings chapter 8 and verse 20, you can link with verse 12. I'll get it real quick. First Kings chapter 8 in verse 20 to link with 2 Samuel 7 and 12. And apologies if I'm saying that the chapters and numbers wrong. Sometimes I get them mixed up. So 2 Samuel 7 and 12, link 1 Kings 8 and 20. 1 Kings 8 and 20, where it reads, and the Lord, or Yahweh, hath performed his word which he spake, and I am risen up in the room of David my father to sit on the throne of Israel, as the Lord, or as Yahweh promised, and have built an house for the name of Yahweh, power of Israel. So not to jump forward too much, because we're going to get this as we go through, but just showing that out of all his sons, that came up, Solomon will be the one that he would deal with. When you read verse 1, it says, Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes, the chiefs of the fathers of the children of Israel, unto King Solomon in Jerusalem, that they might bring up the ark of the covenant of Yahweh out of the city of David, which is Zion. That's what's going on here in this chapter when you read verse 1. So it would take time for this thing to be fulfilled as far as the temple being built, and we'll get into the reasons why, even though David had the idea, that Solomon would actually be the one to do it, his son that would come after. I just want to show that jump in the future, how it connects with the past here. Let's go back to 2 Samuel 7. Let me read verse 12 again. 2 Samuel 7 and 12 says, And when thy days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, I will set up thy seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. It says in 13, He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. So right here, the Most High is telling David, he's going to be the one to build this house for my name, the Most High, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. So 7 and 13, it's like I said, it's a similitude or similar to the priesthood being established through Aaron and through his sons to come after him. And we even see this being made mention similarly when we talk about Aaron and then his son Eleazar, and then through Eleazar his son Phinehas. When we read Numbers 25, it talks about an everlasting covenant made with his family of a priesthood. We see that mention being made there, given Phinehas and his zeal for righteousness when it came to that incident of the brothers going outside the law. So it says, to link with verse 13 about build a house for my name, you can just link this also in 1 Kings. 1 Kings chapter 5. I'll read 5 and 5 as well. So this is 1 Kings chapter 5 and verse 5. It says, And behold, I purpose to build an house unto the name of Yahweh my God, as Yahweh spake unto David my father, saying, Thy son whom I will set upon thy throne in thy room, he shall build an house unto my name. Right? So him calling back to what we're reading now here, and him actually doing it. And then you also have to go with 1 Kings 5 and 5. This is 1 Kings chapter 6 in verse 12. 1 Kings chapter 6 and verse 12, where it says, Concerning this house which thou art in building, if thou wilt walk in my statutes and execute my judgments and keep all my commandments to walk in them, then will I perform my word with thee, which I spake unto David thy father. See that? So same idea here. 6 and 12, which you see in 1 Kings 5 and 5. The promise that he made to him. Sorry, this thing is not moving. Okay. And then we got can add these on too, just as backups. This is First Chronicles 22. First Chronicles 22 and verse 8. This going into not only the what but the why. First Chronicles 22 in verse 8, it says, "But the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Thou hast shed blood abundantly and hast made great wars. Thou shalt not build an house unto my name, because thou hast shed much blood upon the earth in my sight." And then you read on, it talks about him having a son to come after him who will be a peaceable man, and he shall be built in his days. Hence his name Solomon, coming from the Hebrew Shalomah, which just means peace or peaceable. That's right. So he's even named appropriately, given that name, given who he would be. And then also First Chronicles 28. First Chronicles chapter 28, going back to what we just read. I'll read verse 3 to get right to it. First Chronicles 28 and 3. "But God said unto me, Thou shalt not build an house for my name, because thou hast been a man of war, and hast shed blood." So once again, the why behind the what. And it's not to say that David was wicked per se, but it's just to say that the fact that he was, for shedding blood. But no, he's just saying because of the warfare he did to establish it, he said, let that be your legacy. But as far as your son, let his legacy be the building up of my temple. Right? You cleared the path and secured the resources. Now let him be the one to finish it. And you always have this thing you see throughout history, our history and the other nations, as far as succession. And the next in line to be compared to or try to outshine the father that came before him, right? But we don't have this dilemma here when it comes to David and Solomon, because they would just lead different lives, and that's okay, right? David will be known for the one thing, and then Solomon will be known for the other thing. Howbeit, both of them going about doing things in righteousness is key, whether you're destroying nations or building nations, right? So that's the key thing to remember when it comes to their legacy. So now back to 2 Samuel chapter 7. Now we're in 14. So 2 Samuel 7 and 14, which reads, "I will be his father, and he shall be my son." So now it gets a little more interesting, where the Most High is saying that what? Even though it's going to be your son, he said, I'm going to be his father. He shall be my son. So now it's going into, as far as the spirit, because we have physical sons and daughters. We're all considered sons and daughters of the Most High, but now it's going into something specific when it pertains to the son of David. The Most High is saying that I will be his father, and he shall be my son. But then it says, if he commit iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the stripes of the children of men. Right? So now, if you have eyes to see it and ears to hear it and a heart to understand it, we know this is speaking of, as we read previously in Acts 13 and 23, that spirit of Christ, right? Coming through the lineage and the loins of David. But now, just like we read in the case of, say, Elijah and like John the Baptist, we know when it comes to prophecies pertaining to figures, it can happen to them in one life, or it can happen to them in another life. Just as we read in the Ten Commandments, he visits the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation, right? But now just to read the prophecy and add it all together, to link with verse 14, we can link 1 Kings chapter 11, this now dealing with Solomon, the man Solomon. The whole section is that I want is from verse 9 down to 13. So 1 Kings chapter 11 and verse 9. Keep a note. It says, if he, the son of the Most High, if he commit iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the stripes of the children of men. Right, remember that as we get these links. 1 Kings chapter 11 in verse 9, which reads, and the Lord or Yahweh was angry with Solomon because his heart was turned from Yahweh power of Israel, which had appertained unto him twice. And you read above, you see why, because he built these idols unto his strange wives, these false idols, which in the Ten Commandments it says you shall have no other gods before me, or make any graven image in the second of the top 10 commandments. It says, verse 10, and had commanded him concerning this thing that he should not go after other gods, but he kept not that which the Lord or Yahweh commanded. Wherefore Yahweh said unto Solomon, forasmuch as this is done of thee, and thou hast not kept my covenant and my statutes which I have commanded thee, I will surely rend the kingdom from thee, and I will give it to thy servant. You read further on in Kings, which we'll get here, later on in the Sabbath services, since we're going through the Old Testament anyway. It's talking about one of his princes or chiefs that he had rule over, namely Jeroboam, who came of the tribe of Ephraim. But we'll get to that later. Reading on, it says, 12, notwithstanding in thy days, I will not do it for David thy father's sake. I will rend it out of the hand of thy son. This talking about his son that will continue on after him, namely Rehoboam. Jeroboam and Rehoboam being fixtures going forward after this point, when the kingdom will be divided in two. It says in verse 13, howbeit I will not rend away all the kingdom, but will give one tribe to thy son for David my servant's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, which I have chosen, and that tribe being Benjamin, since we touched on that earlier. Jerusalem being in the land, or the plot of land where Benjamin resides. So Judah and Benjamin would be those two tribes we're talking about that are in the south. And of course, Levi by default, since they don't have an inheritance, but God is their inheritance. So there you have the southern kingdom, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. But yeah, that's 9 through 13. But now take note, what we don't see here as far as judgment coming upon Solomon is what? Is being, like it says in 2 Samuel 7 and 14, being chastened with the rod of men and the stripes of the children of men. So what's going on here, right? If this is Solomon, then how come this didn't happen? And the understanding is this, right? Let's get this also in Psalms 89, right? Because it has this as well in Psalms 89. Let's get that as a link as well. With all that getting, let's get understanding. I'll read verse 20, then I'll jump down. Psalms 89 in verse 20. Psalms 89 and verse 20, it says, I have found David my servant, with my holy oil have I anointed him. And it says in 21, with whom my hand shall be established, mine arm also shall strengthen him. So we know who the subject is here, but let's jump down. To verse 30, same chapter, Psalms 89 and verse 30. It says, if his children forsake my law and walk not in my statutes. It says in verse 31, if they break my statutes and keep not my commandments. 32, then I will visit their transgression with the rod and their iniquity with stripes. So we see this same prophecy here that we're seeing in 2 Samuel 7. The prophecy is echoed here as well. But now we know who will come out of David who will receive stripes, and we have different prophets talk about it. But now a famous prophet that we can read that most folks will acknowledge who this is, even though the so-called Christians will acknowledge this, right? When it comes to uh, the son of David and what he would undergo. This is Isaiah chapter 53. Isaiah chapter 53. I'll start from 4. The whole chapter is good. I'm just going to read 4 down to 9 for what we're talking about specifically. So Isaiah 53 and 4 reads, surely he had borne our griefs. He referring to Jesus the Christ, or the anointed Savior. The hour referring to us, children of Israel. Isaiah being after Solomon's time. It says, he had borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. 5. But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. Right? It says in verse 6, all we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way, and Yahweh have laid on him the iniquity of us all. 7, he was oppressed and he was afflicted, yea, he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before his shearers is dumb, so he opened not his mouth. 8, he was taken from prison and from judgment, and who shall declare his generation? He was cut off out of the land of the living, for the transgression of my people was he stricken. These things all being fulfilled by that son of David, who is Jesus the Christ, who will come in the latter time, or what the scripture referred to as the last days. It says finally in verse 9, and I'll stop, and he made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was there any deceit in his mouth. Right? So now there might be confusion, right, which is understandable. So who's he talking about in 2 Samuel 7, right? Because we just read about what Solomon's fate would be, but now reading about this prophecy here about the Christ that will come, which we can go throughout the Gospels to see the ending. When we read all the Gospels to see what will happen with Christ, he would fulfill those things. And we even have the lineage on his mother and father's side, both of them going back to David, namely on his father's side going back through Solomon. So we're really just talking about the regeneration. We're talking about what? How the souls can come back within your family line, where you might be a different man, a different woman, but the same spirit. Like we read about when it comes to John the Baptist, him being a different man from Elijah, but them being the same spirit as was revealed to his father Zacharias by the angel. We read Luke chapter 1. So that's how this can be fulfilled, where it says, if he commit iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the stripes of the children of men. It just wouldn't happen until he would come as Jesus the Christ, as opposed to as Solomon. So that's the understanding there. We can get this too, just to show that even the disciples understood this concept. When we go to John chapter 9, this is St. John, by the way. St. John chapter 9, I'll start from verse 1. Just another scenario, but just this conversation is going to show that the disciples understood this concept of the regeneration, or as they might say today, the reincarnation. You'll hear that word used, which the word itself, reincarnate, right? Carn just means the flesh. So the reincarnate, meaning you come back again in the flesh. Just like regeneration, you're regeneration or regenerated, meaning you were here before and you come back. Just like the Ten Commandments. We said it earlier in the service, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children in the third and fourth generation. And we don't remember, but how we were before is how we'll be again. So if you're seeking righteousness now, more than likely your spirit, when you were here before in your family line, was seeking righteousness as well. It's just only under certain circumstances is it revealed to certain prophets. Yes, this person, when he comes back, he's going to come back and be this person. But for the majority of us, we just don't know. So now check this out. St. John chapter 9, verse 1. It says, and as Jesus or Yahushua passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth. So when Christ is out there doing different works, teaching his disciples, right? His works, they saw a man who was blind from his birth. But now check out what his disciples ask, and then check out what Christ says in response. It says, and his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? So check out their question. Who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? So the consideration is he was born blind. That's why he has this malady when it comes to his eyes, right? And in fact, he was born blind and knew this, but they're asking now the question, did he sin or his parents? Because when we read that in Samuel's, right? When we read about King Saul, about because of the wrong that he did, it caused his family to suffer hardship, even if they were righteous, like in the case of like his son Jonathan, right? That judgment can fall upon your kids that come after you, right? The whole thing though is at least in your own self, when it comes to your own choices, still do the right thing, even if it means your downfall when it comes to what your parents have done, right? It's like similar to us coming into the truth, but being or growing up under the curse because our parents didn't know better as far as how to follow the Most High and follow His Son according to truth. But now, if he was born blind, how could he sin, right? Being in the womb. What they're talking about is what? What he did before he was born, meaning what he did going back. The understanding being, oh, because he did this before, in his pre-generation, going back, when he came back in the third or fourth generation later, he was born blind at that point. That's why it says, who did sin, this man or his parents? That he was born blind. And check out Christ's response, showing that what? Their question is legitimate. It's not like they're asking a weird question, that they don't understand how it works. That's why Christ says this in verse 3. Jesus, or Yahushua, answered, neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. So he's acknowledging that question, that is legitimate, but now he's telling this is a specific situation with this man, as far as he was here at this time, blind at this time, so I can do this miracle so that those that are present can believe that I am the Son of God, right? And that through your faith in me, all is possible. So he's just clarifying that for them in this situation. But we see his understanding about how this can happen. So that's how 2 Samuel 7-14 could take place, right? Between two men, but be in the same spirit, right? How it could fall upon one, or it could be committed by one, but the judgment not come down until he come back. So what you may do in this life could affect what happens to you in a life you may have in the future. So it's not like the prophecy is off, or they got the wrong person, or there should be any confusion. No. It's just like for all things that were destined to happen to Elijah, that couldn't take place unless you had John the Baptist as well to fulfill those prophecies. Similar to in the case of the son of David being Solomon, but then when he would come back as Jesus the Christ later on in that lineage, like we see illustrated in Matthew chapter 11 on his father's side, and Luke chapter 3 on his mother's side. But the focus being on his father's side, as we know, Joseph, Christ's physical father, would have that ancestry going back to Solomon to David. All right, so that was St. John 9, 1-3, Isaiah 53, 4-9, as far as Christ, and this prophecy being echoed. I read in Psalms chapter 80, 21, 20 and 21, sorry. And then I jumped down to 30, and I read down to 32. As far as if he commit iniquity, that he shall be beat with the rods of men. And with the stripes of the children of men. But let's continue on, though. It says in verse 15. Oh, and I'll repeat also. I read 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 9-13, where we see what happened concerning Solomon and his fate, and now him being beat with the rods of men. It didn't happen at that time. So let's go back to 2 Samuel. Let's continue on. Sorry, 1 second here. Put this down. Sure, keep that in my notes. You know what? Let me add this on to now. I'm thinking about it, just to show that connection between Isaiah 53. I know we know it, but let's just show how Peter connects it. Just so we know it's talking about Jesus the Christ, and then connect it all together with 2 Samuel 7, as far as the Isaiah 53 piece anyway. But now, just write this down. I'll get this, and then we'll continue on. Get 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2. First Peter chapter 2. I'll start from 21 and I'll read down. First Peter 2 and 21, it reads, "For even hereunto were ye called, because Christ, or Hamashiach, the anointed, also suffered for us, leaving us an example that ye should follow his steps." Right? Like we always talk about, keeping the Sabbath day, as well as many other laws. It says in 22, "Who did no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth." So when he came as the Christ, right, that son of David, he did no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth. It says in 23, "Who when he was reviled," right, reviled not again. When he suffered, he threatened not, but committed himself to him that judges righteously," talking about his heavenly Father, right? Like we read, "I will be his son. Uh, I will be his father, he shall be my son." Then it says in 24, "Who his own self bare our sins in his own body on the tree, that we, being dead to sins, should live unto righteousness, by whose stripes ye were healed." See that? Just like we read in Isaiah 53, right? As well as 2 Samuel 7. Then finally in 25, "For ye were as sheep going astray, but are now returned unto the shepherd and bishop of your souls," right? A metaphor referring to Jesus the Christ, right? Him being called the shepherd and bishop of our souls, right? Him taking on that similar moniker as David, right? Going back, being a shepherd, him being a shepherd unto us as well, but on a higher level. But yeah, that was First Peter chapter 2. I read from 21 down to 25. So First Peter's 2, 21 to 25. Bold that and then add that real quick to the group. But now we're in verse 15 now, which reads, Second Samuel 7 and 15, "But my mercy shall not depart away from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I put away before thee," right? Which we read before back in First Samuel. "And thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever." So this throne will continue, right? Over the generations, which as we go through Samuel going into the kings, we're going to read about that line of kings as far as the southern kingdom coming from David's loins, and then the northern kingdom coming from Solomon's servant Jeroboam in his line, who came from Ephraim. But like I said, we'll get to that later as you read through this. Then it says in 17, "According to all these words and according to all this vision, so did Nathan speak unto David." Right? So there's a heavy prophecy that he was given here, but now it's going to come to pass, right? Over time, to where the Most High is going to have these things be fulfilled in the time that he intended, right? Which from the outside looking in, it may not be exactly clear, but that's just it, you know? May we, through the Most High's mercy, have eyes that are open to see and ears open that they should hear, and a heart open that it can understand his prophecy, right? It says in verse 18, "Then went King David in and sat before Yahweh, and he said, Who am I, O Adawan Power, or Adawan Alahiah? And what is my house that thou hast brought me hitherto? And this was yet a small thing in thy sight, O Adawan Alahiah. But thou hast spoken also of thy servant's house for a great while to come. And is this the manner of man, O Adawan Yahweh, or Adawan Alahiah? And what can David say more unto thee, for thou, Adawan Alahiah, knowest thy servant. For thy word's sake, and according to thine own heart, hast thou done all these great things to make thy servant know them. Wherefore thou art great, O Adawan Alahiah, for there is none like thee. There is neither is there any Alahiah besides thee, according to all that we have heard with our ears. And what one nation in the earth is like thy people, even like Israel, whom Alahiah went to redeem for a people to himself, and to make him a name, and to do for you great things, and terrible, and for thy land, therefore thy people, which thou redeemest to thee from Egypt, from the nations and their gods. Right? So just throughout this acknowledgement, David coming to him humbly, right? Saying, who am I amongst all the children of Israel? Yet you know us, since you made me and made us all. You clearly see fit to set me apart from others, in this case, for your son to come through my loins. And as far as this one nation that was set apart, for verse 23, we can link this because remember, this goes back to Deuteronomy also. Get Deuteronomy chapter 4, hold this, Deuteronomy chapter 4, let's start from 5. Deuteronomy chapter 4 in verse 5, where it says, this is now going to the Most High talking to Moses to tell the children of Israel. Behold, I taught you statutes and judgments, even as Yahweh my power commanded me, that ye should do so in the land where ye go to possess it. It says in 6, keep therefore and do them, as far as the commandments. For this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes, and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. So this is the reputation Israel is supposed to have. Not like we have now under the curse, which is, the best we got is, entertainment, right? With the entertainment for the other nations, right? And for each other in many cases. When really we're supposed to be so much more than that. Yeah. Run, sing, dance, and play, right? Like Kahanyao Kanan, right? That was this thing he always says, right? That's what they say about us, Run, sing, dance, and play, right? Do something for my amusement. But the nation is supposed to do so much more when it comes to looking to Israel. It's not just that. It's not just their entertainment. And, we're supposed to be looked at for, counsel, for judgment, for arts and crafts, for many things beyond just arts and crafts entertainment. With advice on pretty much all matters when it comes to communication, decision making, resource management, and procurement. But when we follow the commandments, that's the glory that we are supposed to have. The Most High has already given us that, but now until we do it, that's when we'll get it throughout the earth and from the rest of the creation, as far as the other nations and even the animals. But now I'll read 6 again. Deuteronomy 4, I started from 5. I'm going to read 6 again. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. 7. For what nation is there so great, who have power, or Alahiah, so nigh to them, as Yahweh our power is in all things that we call upon him for? 8. And what nation is there so great, that have statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law, which I set before you this day? The law, statutes, and commandments found in the Bible. Not religion, but the law, statutes, and commandments. Not religion is of man, but laws, statutes, and commandments which are of God. I'll read 9 and I'll go back. Verse 9, only take heed to thyself and keep thy soul diligently. And when you keep yourself is by keeping the commandments, right? That's how you don't lose yourself or lose your soul, right? Same thing. Lest thou forget the things which thine eyes have seen, lest they depart from thine heart all the days of thy life, but teach them thy sons and thy sons' sons. Teach this as an inheritance, as a culture to hand down from generation to generation. So that's how it's supposed to be. That's what we're supposed to do. We've fallen from the way as a people, but now we're coming back. All thanks to this promise he made to David and to his son, who we now believe on, and that we follow as the example, as Peter illustrated, as you read earlier. And then as far as keeping yourself by keeping your soul, I made a reference to it. You can just write it down. I'll add this. This is Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 19 in verse 16. Proverbs chapter 19 and verse 16, which reads, He that keepeth the commandment keepeth his own soul, but he that despiseth his ways shall die. So this is like another topic, but it's related, of course. People talk about selling out or selling their souls. Little do they realize in most cases, especially nowadays, folks are selling out or selling something they didn't have to begin with. All they've done is just what? Digging their hole even deeper. They were already the walking dead. Now they're just going below, now they're just going deeper than 6 feet. You were already wicked, now he's going more wicked. And you'll hear about these different artists, they'll say, oh, before they sold their soul for fame and fortune, they were a gospel singer, or they were into, doing this, singing this kind of music, that kind of music. It's just like, that was wicked too. Now they're just even more wicked. Because if you weren't keeping the commandments, you weren't God's property. You are already under Satan's authority. And that's just the truth of it. So now let's go back to 2 Samuel 7. Let's read on in verse 24. 2 Samuel 7 and 24, it reads, For thou hast confirmed to thyself thy people Israel to be a people unto thee forever, and thou, Yahweh, art become their God, or Elohim. So another good verse we can use to show that we're God's people and that we're near unto him. So who we are, but also when we are, which is forever. We're always a people nigh unto him. That will never change. From the Old to the New Testament, that won't change, right? From Genesis to Revelations, that won't change, as we see evidence of that throughout. 25, and now, O Adonai Elohim, or rather, Yahweh Elohim, the word that thou hast spoken concerning thy servant, referring to himself in the third person, David is here, and concerning his house, referring to his own house, David, establish it forever and do as thou hast said, because he knows, even though I don't see myself being worthy of it, right, being humble, the fact that you chose me, I'm not going to go against your word. So may your word or may your will be done. And may I fit the bill the best I can, right? Since I'm so humbly esteemed to be selected for such a service. It says in 26, and let thy name be magnified forever, saying, Yahweh of hosts is the power over Israel, and let the house of thy servant David be established before thee. So magnifying the Most High's name, that's what's key, right? And all we say and do. We can see this example being set by those that came before us, namely the great kings that came before us that we're reading about here when it comes to David, right? Him magnifying the Most High's name, not his own name, but by you magnifying the Most High's name, his name would be magnified even more. That's that's kind of the I want to call it irony, but that's just how it works. It's like the greater you make, or the greater you hold power, the Most High, the greater He'll make you amongst everybody throughout history, right? But for those that put themselves first and say, "No, I'm great," those that do that, it's like their name becomes tarnished. Their name becomes, you know, less set by because they had to put a crown on their own head. We see with Esau, that's the way he has to do things. Whereas opposed to the Most High, where our great forefathers and foremothers, because they gave the Most High and His name the glory, the Most High gave them that everlasting name, where we talk about them even to this day, and can look to them for all different types of inspiration and for guidance, and as an example, right? As they all are examples of Christ, we see them as like little junior saviors, if you will. Christ being the ultimate savior. So verse 27, it says, "For thou, O Yahweh of hosts, power of Israel, has revealed to thy servant, saying, I will build thee an house. Therefore hath thy servant found in his heart to pray this prayer unto thee." So it's your will for me to do this. That's why I'm praying to you about it. And now, O Adawan Alahiah, thou art that Alahiah, and thy words be true, and thou hast promised this goodness unto thy servant. Therefore now let it please thee to bless the house of thy servant, that it may continue forever before thee. For thou, O Adawan Alahiah, or Lord God, hast spoken it, and with thy blessing let the house of thy servant be blessed forever. Right? So David's prayer to the God after being given this astounding news from his prophet, his trusted prophet Nathan. So yeah, this is a serious covenant here, man. Like I said, it's we haven't seen a covenant like this since we were going back in Numbers with Aaron, Eleazar, and Phinehas, right? That everlasting priesthood. So these two family lines within Israel are definitely ones to marvel at, right? And to consider, right? As far as the role they will play for the nation of Israel. All right. So now we're going to go to the next chapter, which this will be a bit swifter. It's going to be more so using visual aids. We're kind of going back into battle mode again. So I'm going to pull up the atlas so we can see the terrain, so we kind of have an idea of where David's traveling to as he expands his empire and where different things are situated as we go through these go through this next chapter in chapter 8. So now, I said it earlier when I first started, 2 Samuel 7, you can parallel it to 1 Chronicles 17, that chapter. This chapter in 2 Samuel 8, you can parallel to 1 Chronicles 18. You'll see similar details there as well when you compare and contrast them. So 2 Samuel chapter 8 in verse 1, it reads, "And after this it came to pass that David smote the Philistines and subdued them. And David took Megath Ammah," where you'll see in some side cabins it says the bridle of Ammah. That's what that I said Megath. It's a Metheg. That that comes from the Hebrew, which means the bridle. Metheg Ammah out of the hand of the Philistines. And you read certain Psalms of David, you'll see they're written during different times or recognizing certain times in history. a psalm you can link up with this 8 and 1 in particular when you read the beginning. And it's funny because there's actually two psalms that echo each other, where he's writing this psalm as he's talking and thanking God as the Most High is blessing him when it comes to his conflict with these other nations and him having success over them in battle. So Psalms chapter 60, when you read the intro, it says, Psalms chapter 60 in verse 1, it reads, to the chief musician upon Shushan Edith, Miktam of David to teach. It says, when he strove with Aram Naharaim and with Aram Zobah, when Joab returned and smote of Edom in the valley of Salt 12,000. Right? So this Aram Naharaim and Aram Zobah, we're going to see these figures come up as you read on in 2 Samuel 8. And you can actually parallel this psalm with, make sure I have the right one here. Yeah, you can parallel this with Psalms 108. It has some similarities. Psalms 108 along with Psalm 60, you can read those together. Kind of like how certain proverbs repeat. Psalms 108 repeats many things in Psalm 60. So you just make a note of that in your notes to read those, where he talks about the Most High is going to build up Israel, but then he's going to take down the nations and have them be under us, right? You'll see both of them talk about how Gilead is his and Manasseh is his, right? Ephraim also is the strength of mine head, talking about the birthright, the children of the birthright, which are Ephraim and Manasseh. Then he says, Judah is my lawgiver, right? Or a person who codifies a set of laws, which Judah would play that role, and even more so as we see David now being established as the beginning of the line of kings. Then it says in verse 9, Moab is my washpot, and over Edom will I cast out my shoe. Over Philistia will I triumph. So if these other nations, as mighty as they are, he's just like saying, Moab is like my washpot, right? That's why I used to wash up all the filth and gunk, right? That's what Moab is, right? He's like the refuse of that. It says, over Edom will I cast out my shoe, right? You read about casting out shoes and spitting and things like that. You see those things being behaviors that we do that are what? A signal of dishonor, right? Namely, when we read in it was Deuteronomy 25 when it talks about uh, a man raising up seed to his elder brother if he was married, right? And they had no children. If he didn't want to do that, do the duty of his brother, it says that the woman could what? Spit in his face and cast a shoe at him. We always would laugh and say, I wonder if that's where Ishmael got that from, right? Where you see Ishmael has that custom. Well, they'll do it even though they don't deal with the Most High, but you go back far enough, we all go back to Abraham, right? So certain things maybe they held on to, but they held on to that from the older Hebrew culture, which is way before even Islam was even the idea. But they held on to that just like they hold on to circumcision and other things, even though they don't follow the other laws that they should. But yeah, you see them cast a shoe as like a means of it's like showing a sign of disrespect because this man didn't want to raise up seed into his brother. So he has that option, but then if he exercises that option, that's that'll be the name, right? That uh, that he'll have in Israel, right? When it talks about casting out a shoe. Let me just, I'll get what I'm talking about real quick. I know it's not exactly related to what we're talking about, but let me just read it real quick and then we'll continue. Because like you were saying, okay, I don't want my brother's house to continue anymore, just because for one reason or another, I don't want to do the duty of uh, my dead brother to his widow now. So it's really a matter of putting aside feelings aside. If you may not like his wife like that or what have you, but once again, it's about his house being able to continue, right? That's the duty of the younger brother or the next brother in line. And we read the book of Ruth. You see the guiding factor of that whole book of Ruth deals with that principle. This principle from Deuteronomy 25. But I'm just going to read the last part just to show the whole casting out my shoe, what that signifies. So Deuteronomy 25, the whole section is from 5 down to 10. I guess it's not that long. So I'll read the 5 verses and we'll go back to 2 Samuel 8. So Deuteronomy, yeah, we're going to finish ahead of time. Deuteronomy chapter 25 in verse 5, it reads, if brethren dwell together and one of them die and have no child, the wife of the dead shall not marry without unto a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go unto her and take her to him to wife and perform the duty of an husband's brother unto her. 6, and it shall be that the firstborn which he beareth shall succeed in the name of his brother which is dead, that his name be not put out of Israel. 7, and if the man like not to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate and to the elders and say, my husband's brother refused to raise up unto his brother a name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak unto him. And if he stand to it and say, I like not to take her, right? So it's being brought to the elders and he still is like, yep, I don't want to do it. 9, then shall his brother's wife come unto him in the presence of the elders and loose his shoe from off his foot and spit in his face and shall answer and say, so shall it be done unto that man that will not build up his brother's house, right? So that's the what, but that's the why. It says, and his name shall be called in Israel the house of him that had his shoe loosed, right? So loosed shoe, that's cast, right? That's a dishonorable thing, right? So that's Deuteronomy 25, 5 down to 10 on that law. And it seems kind of strange, right? We consider how we grow up now, but there's a lot of things that we did according to the law that we don't do now because we were raised by heathen, pretty much, which they want to pick and choose God's laws for one reason or another. This is customary for us to keep. It's funny because I kind of thought about it after the fact, but if you guys remember, sometimes things in pop culture kind of have like they kind of reflect, yeah, they imitate what we see in the scriptures. There was this movie that came out. Esau's good for these biopics about historical events, but they'll turn them into like a drama, like they did with Titanic, movies like that. They had another one called Pearl Harbor. I remember in the Pearl Harbor movie, it's got these two brothers, and they're in World War II, obviously, but then the one dies, and he's got a girl, and she knows both the guy and his younger brother, right? They're all like friends before they go off to war. Right after the Pearl Harbor, I think they were both enlisted, but then they went off to war after the attack or during the attack. I forget exactly. I think it was during the attack. Yeah, he was the one older brother was sent off to fight there, but then he died.
but he didn't die. It's just his plane had crashed, but he wasn't found until much time, a greater time later. But now his younger brother and the older brother's girlfriend, fiance, however it was, they mourned, for his loss. But then they ended up getting together. But then over time, he was found like the wreckage and everything, and he was able to finally, get back home because communications were down. So he couldn't really communicate, and then they found out after so much time when he finally came back. He saw the two of them, and he was just like, "Wait a minute, what's going on here? That's my girl. Why are you with her? Like I'm not dead. I'm alive." And they're just like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. We thought you were dead." So it's just, looking at it, without the knowledge of the scriptures, you would say, okay, that's like kind of awkward. But had he really died, that would have been the normal course of action. So it's kind of funny how, when Esau kind of portrays these things, he'll take something that's actually, that actually be lawful, and then kind of make you weirded out by it, you know, and then take things that we should be weirded out about that are against the law and try to make those things normal, make those things cool. So it's just, a lot of confusion on top of confusion. But anyway, yeah, it's been a while since I've seen that one, but I remember that popping back into my mind when we read this in the scriptures when I was first, learning the different laws. So yeah, loose shoe. So back to 2 Samuel's 8. Now I'm in verse 2. 2 Samuel's 8 and 2. It says, "And he smote Moab and measured them with a line, cast them down to the ground, even with 2 lines measured he. He put to death in one full line to keep alive. And so the Moabites became David's servants and brought gifts." Right? So he fought against Moab and had success. Then he says that what? When he beat them, he had 2 lines he had them cross, right? One for those that would die and those that he will allow to live, right? But it says they became his servants. So remember, when it comes to the nations that aren't in Canaan, if they gave us a problem, we would give them problems, right? But then if they came to us peaceably, then we would acknowledge that. Remember, we were warriors, but not warmongers. Remember, we were talking about this last week, reading about Judas Maccabeus. As we see David, how he would go about things, it would be in a similar fashion to where it wasn't just kill them all just because. No, if they acknowledged, okay, you're God's people, you know, we take the knee, we'll become your servant, then we wouldn't have to battle with them. But plain nations, they didn't want to do that. They said, the heck with you guys. We don't want to pay you gifts. We don't give you gifts or tribute. No. So he said, okay, now it's time to go to war. Then it says in verse 3, David smote also Hadadezer, the son of Rehob, the king of Zobah, as he went to recover his border at the river Euphrates. It says, and David took from him 1,000 chariots and 700 horsemen and 20,000 footmen. And David, oh boy, it's 1611 English sometimes. I want to make sure I read this word right. Looks like Hoft. But let me see how it looks in this King James. This other one. 2 Samuel. Yeah, that's right. Okay, same word. False alarm. Want to make sure. Huffed. David huffed. Where am I at? Oh. All the chariot horses and reserved them for 100 chariots. It says, and when the Syrians of Damascus came to succor Hadadezer, king of Zobah, David slew of the Syrians 22,000 men. Then David put garrisons in Syria of Damascus, and the Syrians became servants to David and brought gifts. And Yahweh preserved David whithersoever he went, And David took the shields of gold that were on the servants of Hadadezer and brought them to Jerusalem. And from Bittah and from Berothai, cities of Hadadezer, King David took exceeding much brass. Right? So if we go back on the our trusty Bible Atlas, we can get some of these locations here where we talk about Syria and Damascus. Remember, they were above the land of Israel / Canaan. And we see here this number 2, kind of towards the middle, where we see the Dead Sea in the middle, and you see Moab, and you see like a red circle with 2 spears or 2 swords going through it. Is number 2. David defeats the Moabites in reference to what we read. So we see Moab situated right here. But then as we go up the map, and we got where the green starts to stop, you see Damascus, and you see Zobah with the 2 swords with the red circle, and then to the right you have the Berothal, the city that was just mentioned. So David strikes this Hadadezer, king of Zobah, which was like another family of Syrians, but they ruled up a little above Damascus, which was like where their chief city was. Anytime you see Aram or Aram, remember that's the native name for Syria. Not Assyria, but Syria, what they call Syria today. But before, it was known as Aram. So anytime you see Syrians without the A, in the Hebrew, you'll see Aramia, or this means Aramites, or the people of Aram, who were another Shemitic people older than Hebrews, but they go back to the first sons of Shem. You go to Genesis chapter 10. So that's who the Aramites are. So we see Berothal, where he struck that city down. Yeah. Okay, we didn't get there yet. And then we got okay, so go back here. I'm gonna pull this map up again one more time. We read a little further down, so make sure I don't miss it. Okay, so now it says in verse 9, it says, when Toi, king of Hamath, heard that David had smitten all the host of Hadadezer, 10, that Toi sent Joram his son unto King David to salute him and to bless him, because he had fought against Hadadezer and smitten him. For Hadadezer had wars with Toi, and Joram brought with him vessels of silver and vessels of gold and vessels of brass, which also King David did dedicate unto Yahweh, with the silver and gold that he had dedicated of all nations which he subdued, of Syria and of Moab, and of the children of Ammon, who were right down there too, next to Moab, and of the Philistines, who were, westward, and of Amalek, who were southward as well, and of the spoil of Hadadezer, the son of Rehob, king of Zobah, which we just showed you on the map. So, pretty much this Toi was like, and his son Joram were like, oh man, thanks, David. You did us one solid. We acknowledge your authority. He was a thorn on our side too. The fact you took him out, we didn't have to. We thank you for that, right? We've seen that come up before, right? The whole enemy of my enemy, right? Who is the enemy of my enemy? Will he be my friend or be my enemy? Their initiative here was, wow, David, you're our friend, right? At least we take you as our friend since you took out this guy that we didn't like. So it's showing this conflict between one Aramite versus another Aramite city and their leaders. So they side with David in this regard. Then it says, and David get him a name when he was returned from smiting the Syrians in the Valley of Salt, being 18,000 men, right? Now on the maps, it's kind of weird because you see this Valley of Salt situated in different places, which I'm wondering if the Valley of Salt had more than one location, or maybe it just been a euphemism, kind of like the sons of Belial. But upon research, I didn't find anything. But as I look further on, when we come back to Samuel's, maybe I'll find something as far as more details when it comes to this Valley of Salt. Because if you see here on this map, pull it up bigger so I can see it myself. We see one being mentioned here in this region, right? As far as what we're about to read next in this chapter 8. They situated here, but we know the fight they had is with the Aramites and the Syrians is up here. But there's a Valley of Salt associated with Esau too. But now is that the same as the Valley of Salt as far as where they fought with them up here, as far as the Syrians that they come all the way down here to fight? Doesn't seem like it makes much sense. But it makes it seem as though the Valley of Salt is associated with the Syrians as well. So, like I said, so far what I've looked up in just my basic resources, like Bible dictionaries and atlases, haven't seen anything to distinguish more than one. But we can definitely confirm this one, at least in Edom. But as far as the one that's in, there's one in the north. It remains to be seen. But either way, if it is a euphemism, that wouldn't be strange. Just like we know the sons of Belial isn't a place per se. We just know it's talking about the sons of wickedness. And we know when we talk about the Valley of Salt, when we talk about a Valley of Salt, we know it's just synonymous with a place that can't be cultivated. You can't grow things there. It's like a place of death. It's almost like Psalm 23. Probably arguably David's famous psalm, right? Do I walk through the valley of the shadow of death? So the Valley of Salt is kind of parallel to that. Like we see we read it before in Jeremiah 17, starting from 5 down to about 9, right? Where it says, cursed be the man who trusteth the man who maketh flesh his arm, etc., etc. It says how he'll be like a person who's in the heath, in the desert, in a salt land not inhabited. So the Valley of Salt could be a euphemism just for that. But either way, the good news is these nations are catching L's, are catching losses to us, and losing plenty of men. We see 18,000 here, like we see here in verse 13. But now I'm about to read next. We see this number 5 here at the bottom, number 4, number 5. This is us now fighting against Edom, who's beneath us. And now you see Moab and Ammon here in the green here, and also Ammon here on the upper going towards the right. But we'll read more about that as we go on in 2 Samuel's. Let's go back to verse 14 now. When we think about garrisons, think of it as like what Esau does now, especially in America, when they fight in a country and they set up an embassy, right? Just pretty much like an outpost. Think of it like that. When we set up garrisons, it pretty much works that way. It's the same idea, same concept. When we take over people, we put a garrison here like an outpost. Kind of watch over things and to answer any questions that the people that we've now taken over have. It says, 2 Samuel 8:14, it reads, he put garrisons in Edom. Throughout all Edom, he put garrisons, and all they of Edom became David's servants. And Yahweh preserved David whithersoever he went. 15, and David reigned over all Israel. And David executed judgment and justice unto all his people. See that? Judgment and justice. Like we talked about before, it's about God's justice being served. Otherwise, our rule will be short-lived. It's not like other nations where they just take over whatever they can for their own reasons. No, we do it according to what? The Most High's law to establish his righteous judgment upon the earth. We do it first in our own land. And we see David doing that. We saw Joshua do it before him. We see it, Judas Maccabeus doing it after David, right? Those three figures kind of being like key figures we look at when we talk about conquering and conquest. Those are three good examples to look at when we talk about, making war and expanding territories and how to go about it, when to do it, when not to do it. Those three are good figures to look at when it comes to that. Right now we're just happen to be reading about David as he does it. It says, In 16, and Joab, the son of Zeruiah, remember that's his top general, is captain of the host now, was over the host. It says, and Josaphat, the son of Ahilud, was recorder. Now you look in the Hebrew, you'll see the word ma zakar, which we know zakar just means to remember, right? So the mazakar literally means a rememberer or a remembrancer, or you'll see recorder, right? So someone pretty much takes down records. And it's kind of interesting too because it seems when it comes to the reign of David and for Solomon, Hezekiah and Josiah, the three righteous kings, right? Which you read about that in just link this with 16. When you read in Ecclesiasticus, certain things are kind of interesting that might jump out to you when you look at different people and places. This is Ecclesiasticus 49 in verse 4. Once again, Ecclesiasticus 49 and 4. Sorry, my phone stopped working. Here we go. 49 and 4. It reads, all except David and Ezekias and Josiah were defective, for they forsook the law of the Most High. Even the kings of Judah failed. So as a whole, the kings of Judah failed. We have those three. You can look at their entire life, even where they may have made a mistake or error here and there, they wholly served the Lord their God. They didn't go after other gods throughout their lifetime, or leave high places sitting there, or have some other tarnish. So as a whole, they failed, but out of those three. But something that's ironic is, out of those three, what you'll see is they all had a particular person in their cabinet called a recorder, someone who keeps track of, I guess different types of dealings, transactions, what have you, right? But you only see recorders for those three kings. But for the other kings, they don't have the office of recorder. But you see one for David, you'll see one for Hezekiah much later, and you'll see one for Josiah a little later after that. And just examples that go with 8 and 16. For Hezekiah's recorder, just write down 2 Kings chapter 18. 2 Kings chapter 18. It reads, and when they had called to the king, there came out to them Eliakim the son of Hilkiah, which was over the household, and Shibna the scribe, and it says, and Joah the son of Asaph the recorder. So it's not exactly the scribe, but it says a recorder, right? So once again, this is more like not so much like a journaler, more so like someone who keep like records of transactions, right? Like a bookkeeper of sorts. But now for Josiah, you can go to 2 Chronicles 34. So that was Hezekiah's. But now you can go to 2 Chronicles 34. 33, 34. In verse 8, it says, now in the 18th year, once again, 2 Chronicles 34 in verse 8, Now, in the 18th year of his reign, you read above the reign of King Josiah, when he had purged the land and the house, he sent Shaphan, the son of Azaliah, and Maaseiah, the governor of the city, and Joah, the son of Jehoahaz, the recorder, to repair the house of Yahweh his God. See that? It's funny because they both have the name Joah, but different fathers, so you know it's not the same Joah. So years apart. But as you see that recorder again, we'll see for any other kings. So I guess there might be something there. Who knows, right? As far as the importance of righteousness and bookkeeping. We know a law we always have to go to, or scripture like to always go to when it comes to bookkeeping. You can just write down Ecclesiasticus 42:7. Like you read different folks that deal with like finance and things like that. They always talk about when you go to the bank for a loan, they'll say that you're. It's not about your how good, what kind of good grades you had, but what kind of financial statement you maintain, right? If you're good at keeping a financial statement to show profit, loss, assets, liabilities, they'll say a bank will see that and go, "Oh, okay, I'll be more than willing to give you money to develop further whatever your enterprise is you're trying to do." But that goes without saying when it comes to what's pretty much already there within the law, especially given how we would deal with the Levites and the role they would play when it comes to receiving a tenth from all Israel and being able to balance that out. And even though the law talks about having a just balance and a just weight, just going into how when it came to weights and measures, we had laws to enforce that. A just balance, a just weight, a just ephah, and a just hin. Maybe we'll do another class on that coming up. So this is Ecclesiasticus 42 in verse 7. It reads, "Deliver all things in number and weight, and put all in writing that thou givest out or receivest in." So it's safe to assume that this recorder, that was a part of their responsibility. Okay. So now back to 2 Samuel 8. I'm in verse 17 now. And it reads, "And Zadok, the son of Ahitub, and Ahimelech, the son of Abiathar, were the priests." They're going to come up later too as you read on in 2 Samuel's. We know Ahimelech, he's already in the picture from going back to 1 Samuel's when Saul sought after David's life and they found the priest at Nob. And this Ahimelech was the only one to survive out of those priests that they killed there, or that Saul had Doeg the Edomite killed, right? Because remember, he asked his men to do it. And they were like, "We can't, my king, we can't lay our hand on the Lord's anointed, right? We know you're our king, we respect you, but we can't do that because the Lord said." So that's why he turned to his Doeg the Edomite and said, "Yeah, you do it." And then he did it. You don't read about him hesitating at all. It just shows you these other nations, right? They got no problem. Even when they're under our command, they're already at they're already ready to go when it comes to if we go off. They're ready to go off with us. Then it says, and Sariah was the scribe or secretary. Then finally it says in 18, and Benaiah the son of Joiada was over both the Cherethites and the Pelethites. And keep an eye out for Benaiah, right? Because he's got a future ahead of him too, as you go through the Samuels, going into the kings as well, going into Solomon's reign, right? So let's keep that in mind. We see certain names, when they first come on the scene, they might be younger, but then as they get older and as new kings come on, they'll get elevated positions, right? Where they'll say, okay, This person was the captain of the host, but now Benaiah, he's a third warrior, but going forward during the time of Solomon, he will end up taking the position of Joab, the son of Zeruiah, right, as the new captain of the host. But yeah, just keep an eye on these names as we go through them. And then it says, and David's sons were chief rulers, or in the side caption you'll see princes. Remember, prince in the Hebrew just means a chief or a ruler. In this case, it so happens they're sons of the king. But a prince, when you see that word prince in the scriptures, it is not necessarily referring to the son of a king per se, but it's referring to a ruler over a particular thing, right? Or a particular place, or particular persons. We just call them princes, or shar in the Hebrew, which just means a chief or a chieftain, right? All right, so we'll end there. So we made pretty good timing. So that concludes 2 Samuel's chapter 7 and 8, right? Where we see the Davidic covenant being set up, as well as David's expansion. And as you go on in 2 Samuel, we're going to see more of that going forward, right? And then some of his dealings when it comes to his own people within his cabinet, his army at large, as well as his dealings with other nations. And we'll see different examples of nations that take the knee and go, Israel, we respect your authority. Here, accept this humble gift. Versus other nations that say, man, the hell with you and the hell with your people. We didn't like King Saul. We don't like you either, King David. And it's like, oh, okay, all right. So, got to go to war with them now. So we'll get to see different examples of that as we go through David's conquest as he establishes Israel further. And we read chapters 9 and 10 a couple weeks from now. But before we get there, remember next week, since we just did the Old Testament, we're going to be in the New Testament next week. So we read Colossians 3 and 4 last time. So the next two chapters are going to be 1 Thessalonians chapters 1 and 2. Once again, 1 Thessalonians chapters 1 and 2 are going to be the readings for next Sabbath. So with that, I'll say, Barakateh Hawa by Hashem Yahweh Shai Laharuch HaKodash, which just means, blessed be the Most High in the name of Christ by way of the Holy Spirit. Without them, and this would be possible for us or for any of the other branches of Christ out there doing the work, waking up Israel, establishing the different branches that we all extend from, which is the vine himself, Jesus the Christ, which I'll close out with that before we do the closing prayers. I always try to think of it this way, just as far as a visual. I like to use this metaphor. So this is St. John chapter 15. St. John chapter 15. I'll read from 1 down to 5. This is Christ speaking. He says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman. The husbandman is pretty much just a gardener, but instead of growing a garden, he's growing a vineyard. So you got farmers, you got gardeners, and you got husbandmen or husbandry. Right? So we always have those three types of key agriculture. Right? Growing crops, growing orchards, and growing vineyards. You said garden is kind of like maybe a fourth one, maybe. Where what you're growing isn't it might be like a smaller plot when it comes to gardens. But when it comes to like a field, you just grow one thing out there, something that's like covers a greater square mileage, like wheat or like barley, right? Something like that. So husbandman is specifically one that grows a vineyard. Verse 2, every branch in me that beareth not fruit, he taketh away. And every branch that beareth fruit, he purgeth it, that it may bring forth more fruit. So it's using the idea of a person who tends to a vine and their profession as far as how they trim the leaves to get them to grow more when they bring in different fruits. He's saying that's how we function as a nation. We're like a vine that's growing. And we want to be like husbandmen that tend to our own vines so that more vines can stem off from us. Right? So like a tree, similar to how you have like a family tree, it kind of goes from the top down. We want it to have the same kind of thing when it comes to how we grow our roots from our roots on down. It says, verse 3, I think we read this last night, if I'm not mistaken. Now you are clean through the word which I have spoken unto you, right? Showing that you spiritually clean yourself through the scriptures, right? So physical cleanness is just a reflection of being spiritually clean, which we wash up by using this as far as our spiritual body. But then it says in verse 4, abide in me and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself except it abide in the vine, no more can ye except ye abide in me. So if you cut yourself off from the root, that's it. Just like any branch that falls off a tree or any vine that falls off of a root, that's it. Your lifespan is cut short. It says in 5, I am the vine, ye are the branches. He that abideth in me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit. For without me, ye can do nothing. So we need Christ. We got to be plugged into Christ, or we'll lose power. We have to be rooted in Christ, otherwise we'll die. That's it. So Shar Shabbat once again, Manakad Tawa, which is good afternoon. With that, we'll do the closing prayers. Oh, let me make this. Just say this too. Make sure I put them in the bottom as well. I forget to mention these sometimes, even though we have these banners. Just remember that our conference is every Tuesday and Friday from 7 to 10 p.m. That's the number you can call, as well as the access code. And if you need to get it again, just make sure that you pause or rewind the video. And if you want to make a donation for a holy day or just in general to our church, Hayashala Kanas, here's the address you want to send it to, right? As far as like a check or a money order. That's our permanent address. 3826B, Germantown Avenue, Philadelphia, PA 19140. If you want to make a donation online, we have this address too, which is paypal.me/HYK12. Okay. All right. And now, with that, we'll do the closing prayers. Prokapyawa by Shumi Hawashai, Asharat Hanam Parya Gapan Tuara Aman. La Yawa by Shumi Hawashai of Yasha Allah.
English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai. That gives to us the fruit of the vine, thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel. Amadwa, Panimay Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. Yahweh Basham, Yahweh Shai, Babakushai, Shemai, Lanawa, I third, Yam Yan, I third, Shalak, Mike Allah, Walla Allahayim, Tazwadakim, La Shema Ayel, Barak, Rapha, Magan, Wa Chazayak, Banya Yash Allah Washalak Lanawa Rabiim Kakamad Rabiim Da'ath Rabiim Bayanad Rabiim Sabalanwak Rabiim Mamawan Rabiim Aqua Rabiim Mahabiim Rabiim Haganad Rakhanaya Wasalak Ka Katsayannawa La Akim Wa Akiwa Wayash Allah Tham Yad Wai Walam Basham Yahawashai Thawada Aman. English translation. Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, please listen to us now, right now. Send Michael and the righteous powers to watch over, bless, heal, protect, and make strong the children of Israel. Sent to us much wisdom, much knowledge, much understanding, much patience, much faith, much brotherhood, much love, much spiritual protection, and forgive all our sins. For the brothers, sisters in Israel, always and forever, in the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you, so be it. The Four Corners Prayer. Yahweh Basham, Yahweh Shai, Barak Nawe, Wayash Allah, Wabat Yasapariam, Shemai, Yasharallah, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Echad. English translation, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, bless us in Israel in the house of books. And then we said, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. So it's Shar Shabbat Asher Allah Wa Manakah Tawah.